Evil cop shaves little girl's head, but when her father shows up, everyone is stunned. Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories. The crisp night air carried a soft chill. But Emily Carter barely noticed. Her heart still hummed with excitement. Her mind replaying the thunderous applause from earlier that evening. Dressed in a flowing white gown, she walked gracefully down the quiet streets, her fingers absent-mindedly brushing over the delicate concert program in her hands, the proof of her first solo performance at the Madison Concert Hall. It had been a night of magic, of dreams unfolding before her eyes. And most importantly, of making her father Nathan Carter proud. Her intricate braided hairstyle, woven with care that morning by her father, remained flawless despite the drizzle beginning to settle in the air. "Your hair is your crown," Nathan had said, his skilled hands carefully twisting the strands. "Tonight, you shine." And she had. The audience had been mesmerized. Their applause a symphony of approval that still echoed in her ears. But dreams can shatter in an instant. A sharp flash of red and blue lights slashed through the darkness, pulling Emily abruptly from her bliss. The low hum of an approaching patrol car made her spine stiffen with unease. Officer Lisa Harper, a middle-aged policewoman with a gaze as cold as steel, slowed her cruiser as she spotted the lone figure walking down Maple Street. Her tired, cynical mind immediately went on alert. A black girl in a pristine dress. Walking alone this late? Braided hair? Suspicious. The car lurched to a stop, headlights glaring down on Emily like an interrogation lamp. The window rolled down, and Harper's authoritative voice cut through the night like a blade. "Stop right there. What are you doing out here at this hour?" Emily froze, momentarily caught between shock and confusion. Still clutching her concert program, she turned toward the officer, her heartbeat quickening. "Good evening, ma'am," she said carefully, her voice steady but respectful. "I just finished performing at the Madison Concert Hall. I'm on my way home." Harper narrowed her eyes, stepping out of the vehicle. She barely processed Emily's words. Her attention locked onto the braids, tight, symmetrical, and elaborate, a hairstyle she'd seen too many times before on mugshots and wanted posters. "That's quite a hairstyle you got there," Harper muttered, her voice dripping with suspicion. "You sure you're not part of a gang?" The accusation hit like a slap. Emily's grip on the program tightened. "Excuse me?" she asked, trying to mask the offense in her voice. "That kind of hair," Harper continued, circling her like a predator assessing prey, "looks like gang affiliation to me." Emily took a slow breath, fighting to keep her emotions in check. "This is just a hairstyle," she said, her voice firmer now. "My father did it for me this morning. It has nothing to do with gangs." But Harper wasn't listening. She reached for her belt, where her handcuffs gleamed under the streetlights. "Show me some ID," she demanded. Emily hesitated, not out of guilt, but out of disbelief. "Ma'am, I haven't done anything wrong." "Wrong answer." Harper's jaw clenched, obstructing an officer. "Huh? I don't have time for games. Either you cooperate, or I take you in." Emily's world tilted. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She had just come from a place where people had applauded her, celebrated her talent, and now, in the same city, she was being treated like a criminal. She reached slowly into her purse, retrieving her ID with measured caution. But it didn't matter. Harper had already made up her mind. "Put your hands where I can see them," Harper snapped. "Turn around." Emily's stomach lurched. "Wait, what? I didn't." The cold, metallic clink of handcuffs snapping shut around her wrists cut off her protest. The night that had once been filled with music and triumph had transformed into a nightmare of humiliation and injustice. As Harper shoved her into the backseat of the patrol car, the concert program slipped from Emily's grasp, landing in a puddle on the pavement. The ink began to bleed. The words, "Madison Concert Hall, soloist, Emily Carter," dissolving into nothing. And just like that, the night that had once belonged to Emily was stolen from her. The cold, sterile walls of the police station were a stark contrast to the golden glow of the concert hall Emily had stood in just hours ago. Her wrists ached from the tightness of the handcuffs, her breath shallow as she sat on the metal bench of the holding area. She was still in her elegant white dress, now damp from the rain, the fabric clinging to her like a cruel reminder of how exposed she felt. Her carefully braided hair, the one her father had so lovingly done that morning, was still intact, but not for long. Across the room, Officer Lisa Harper stood behind her desk, her eyes scanning a blank intake form with the kind of detached efficiency only years of power could bring. She barely looked at Emily as she spoke. "That hairstyle of yours," Harper said flatly. "It needs to go." Emily's blood ran cold. Her fingers curled into fists in her lap. "Excuse me?" Harper finally looked up, tilting her head as if addressing a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "We can't have suspected gang affiliates walking around in here. It's policy." Emily's chest tightened. "I'm not in a gang. That's not up to you to decide." Emily felt something inside her crack, but she kept her voice steady. "This isn't just hair." Her voice was softer now, but there was steel beneath it. "My father braided this for me this morning. It's a part of who I am." Harper scoffed. "Well, now it's a part of the evidence pile." A knock on the door made Emily flinch. A middle-aged man with a graying beard, George, the station's barber, stepped in hesitantly, holding his clippers in one hand, his eyes immediately locking onto Emily. Something in his gaze softened when he saw her. This wasn't the usual suspect he was used to seeing in that chair. "You called for me, Officer Harper?" Harper nodded. "Get rid of it. All of it." George hesitated. "She's just a kid, and I just gave you an order." Harper's voice left no room for negotiation. Emily clenched her jaw as George stepped toward her, his face apologetic. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he whispered under his breath. "I don't want to do this." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Then don't." George hesitated, his fingers trembling around the clippers. But Harper's presence loomed behind him, a silent enforcer of the power that Emily was now at the mercy of. With a soft click, the clippers roared to life. The first lock of hair fell to the floor. Emily inhaled sharply. She had expected to feel anger. She had prepared for shame. But what struck her most was the loss, a deep, wrenching grief that she hadn't been ready for. Each braid that landed on the cold, tiled floor wasn't just hair. It was the hours of patience her father had poured into them that morning. The way his fingers had moved with practiced skill. The quiet hum of his voice as he had told her she was beautiful. That she would shine that night. And now, that crown was being stripped away. Harper leaned against the desk, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with detached indifference. "This would have been easier if you had just cooperated earlier." Emily's hands trembled in her lap, but she refused to let a single tear fall. She stared at the mirror on the opposite wall, watching as each strand of her identity was erased in real time. But she held Harper's gaze in the reflection, her expression unwavering. If Harper expected her to break, she would be sorely disappointed. When the last of her braids had fallen, George turned off the clippers. His shoulders slumped as if he had taken something from her that he could never return. Emily reached down, her fingers brushing over the pile of her own hair on the floor. Carefully, she gathered the fallen strands in her hands, holding them like the remains of something sacred. Harper straightened, patting a folder on her desk. "Now, maybe you'll think twice before walking around looking like trouble." Emily stood slowly, the weight of her humiliation pressed down on her shoulders. But as she turned to face Harper, her chin lifted just slightly. "You can take my hair," she said, her voice quiet but unshaken. "But you'll never take my dignity." For the first time, Harper hesitated, a shift in the air, a crack in her authority. Emily didn't give her a chance to respond. She simply turned away, gripping the remnants of her braids in her hands as she walked out of the room. Her steps steady despite the storm raging inside her. She had lost something tonight. But she refused to let Harper take everything. Nathan Carter had faced dangerous men before. He had spent years infiltrating criminal organizations, playing a game where one wrong move could cost him his life. He had stared into the eyes of killers, liars, and men who thrived on power. But nothing had ever filled him with more rage than seeing his daughter sitting in a cold police station. Her once beautiful braids shorn away, her eyes dark with silent defiance. His grip tightened around the folder of documents he had just slammed onto Captain Thomas Monroe's desk. The force of it sent a shudder through the room. But Monroe barely flinched. The captain, a man known for his level-headed leadership, simply leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he studied Nathan's face. "Tell me," Nathan said, his voice like steel barely containing the fire underneath. How do you plan to explain to the Federal Bureau of Investigation that one of your officers just detained, humiliated, and forcibly cut the hair of my daughter? Monroe exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. He knew the weight of the man standing before him. Nathan Carter wasn't just another citizen filing a complaint. He was a federal agent, one of the best operatives in an ongoing undercover mission that had taken years to build. And now, thanks to Lisa Harper's ignorance, that mission was hanging by a thread. Nathan, Monroe began carefully, but Nathan wasn't done. I have spent 3 years gaining the trust of Richard Grayson's network. He continued, his voice sharp and lethal. 3 years feeding them just enough intel to keep them convinced that I'm one of them. And now, because of one incompetent officer, I am about to lose everything. Do you understand what you've done? Monroe's jaw tightened. I didn't do this. No, Nathan snapped. But she did. He turned his furious gaze toward Harper, who stood rigid by the door, her hands clasped behind her back, her face a poor mask of forced indifference. But beneath the professional veneer, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw clenched ever so slightly. Nathan took a slow, predatory step toward her. Did you enjoy it? His voice was dangerously quiet. Did it make you feel powerful? Humiliating a girl who did nothing wrong? Cutting her hair like she was property? Like she was a criminal? Harper's lips parted, but she said nothing. Nathan let out a sharp breath and shook his head. You didn't just cross a line. He muttered. You detonated a bomb. Monroe finally stood, his authoritative presence filling the room. Nathan, he said, his tone firm but measured. I will handle this. Officer Harper will be suspended effective immediately. An investigation will be launched. Oh, you think that's enough? Nathan barked out a laugh. But there was no humor in it. He turned back to Harper, stepping so close that she had no choice but to meet his gaze. You think I need an investigation to tell me what you are? He murmured. I've met people like you before. You don't see a girl, you see a suspect. You don't see her innocence, her accomplishments, her future. All you saw was her hair. And that was enough for you to decide that she was trouble. Harper finally spoke. I was following protocol. Nathan's laugh was cold. Protocol? He took a sharp step forward. And for the first time, Harper's mask cracked. She instinctively took a step back. Tell me, Nathan continued, his voice dropping into something deadly. How many white girls have you forced into that chair? How many of them have you held down while you stripped away their dignity? Harper swallowed, her mouth pressing into a thin line. That's what I thought, Nathan said. Monroe cleared his throat, stepping between them. Nathan, I will make this right. He promised. I know you're angry. Angry? Nathan turned on him, his voice vibrating with fury. Captain, I have spent years risking my life to protect this country. To protect families like yours. I have gone deep undercover, knowing that one wrong move means my wife and daughter get buried in unmarked graves. And the one damn time, that I wasn't there to protect my little girl. One of your officers treated her like a criminal because of her skin and her braids? Monroe sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Nathan. No, Nathan interrupted, voice now ice cold. This doesn't get swept under the rug. She will pay for what she's done. Monroe hesitated, then nodded. She will. Harper's face paled slightly, but she remained silent. Nathan took a deep breath, then turned back toward the holding area, his rage simmering beneath his skin. Emily sat on a bench just beyond the bars, her short, uneven hair catching in the dim station light. She looked up at him with those big, strong eyes, the same eyes her mother used to have. The sight of her wrecked him. Slowly, he approached, crouching in front of her. Hey, baby girl, he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Emily blinked, and for the first time since this nightmare had started, her bottom lip trembled. I didn't cry, she murmured. Nathan exhaled sharply, his chest tightening. I know, he whispered, reaching out and gently cradling her face in his hands. I know you didn't. Emily's fingers curled into his sleeves. And finally, after holding it together for so long, she let herself collapse into his arms. Nathan held her tightly, pressing his lips to the top of her head. I've got you, he promised, his voice dangerously soft. And I swear to you, sweetheart, they will never touch you again. Emily nodded against his chest, her breath hitching. Nathan's gaze hardened over her shoulder, locking onto Harper like a sniper about to take the shot. She would regret this. Every last second of it. Lisa Harper sat in the dimly lit police station hallway. Her hands clasped together so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The quiet hum of voices and the distant ringing of phones felt suffocating. Every second that passed only solidified the weight pressing down on her chest. She wasn't a rookie, she had been on the force for years. She had made arrests, handled dangerous situations, and had seen her fair share of trouble. But this was different. From the moment Nathan Carter stormed into the station, his presence was like a hurricane, tearing through every ounce of confidence she had once carried. She had seen anger before, had faced criminals who screamed threats at her, had dealt with lawsuits and complaints, but none of it had ever felt as terrifying as the silent rage burning in Nathan Carter's cold, calculating eyes. Lisa had always believed that she was just doing her job, following protocol, keeping the streets safe, but now, as she sat there, she could no longer ignore the truth clawing at her insides. She had messed up. No, it was more than that. She had ruined something. She had destroyed something. And now, she was about to pay for it. The heavy door to Captain Monroe's office creaked open, and Lisa nearly jumped at the sound. She looked up just in time to see Nathan step out. His expression unreadable, his movements precise and composed. He didn't look at her as he walked past, he didn't need to. The cold dismissal in his body language was enough to let her know that she was no longer an officer in his eyes. Just a problem to be handled. Monroe followed closely behind, his normally calm demeanor replaced by something darker. He was angry, no. More than that, he was furious, but not the kind of anger that came with yelling. This was the quiet kind. The kind that meant something irreversible had just happened. "Harper," Monroe called, his voice sharp and firm. "Inside, now." Lisa swallowed the lump in her throat and stood, forcing herself to walk into the office without hesitation. The moment the door shut behind her, Monroe threw a thick manila folder onto his desk, the contents spilling slightly from the force. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Monroe's voice was deceptively calm. Lisa remained standing, her fingers twitching against her sides. "Captain, you detained a federal agent's daughter on false suspicion. You forcibly cut her hair under the assumption that she was involved in gang activity, without a single shred of evidence." Monroe snapped. His voice was low, controlled, but filled with dangerous disappointment. Lisa stiffened. "I was following. Do not say, protocol, to me right now. Harper," Monroe warned, his patience gone. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his graying hair. "You didn't just humiliate a young girl. You didn't just violate her rights. You jeopardized one of the most dangerous undercover operations we've been working on for years." Lisa's heart stopped. Monroe's glare hardened. "You heard me. Nathan Carter has been deep undercover for 3 years, 3 damn years, getting closer to bringing down Richard Grayson and his entire network. And because of you, because of your recklessness, Grayson is now suspicious." The room tilted for a second. Lisa felt the air shift, like someone had just knocked the floor out from under her. She had heard of Richard Grayson. Everyone had. The man was a ghost in the criminal underworld, running an empire built on drugs, arms smuggling, and human trafficking. The FBI had been trying to take him down for years. And now, thanks to her, his paranoia would be sky high. This could cost lives. "Harper." Monroe's voice was quieter now, but heavier. "Not just Carter's. Every single person in his operation is in danger now. And if that mission collapses, do you know what happens?" Lisa didn't answer. She didn't need to. She had screwed up beyond anything she could have ever imagined. Monroe leaned forward, his hands pressing into the desk. "Effective immediately. You are suspended without pay. An internal investigation has been launched. And trust me, Harper, you better pray that's the worst thing that happens to you." Lisa's breath hitched. "Captain, get out." The words cut like a blade. Lisa hesitated, but Monroe's glare told her there was nothing left to say. Slowly, she turned and walked out of the office, her legs feeling like lead. As she stepped into the hallway, her gaze flickered toward the waiting area where Emily Carter still sat. Her father beside her. Emily met her eyes, unflinching, her cropped, uneven hair a stark reminder of the damage Lisa had done. For the first time, Lisa felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Shame. She turned away and walked toward the exit, the cold air hitting her like a slap the moment she stepped outside. The consequences had begun, And she knew, this was only the start. The heavy silence in the room felt like a weight pressing down on Lisa Harper. A weight she couldn't escape, no matter how hard she tried. Her office felt like a cage, the fluorescent lights buzzing above her head as she sat, staring at the empty desk before her. It had been days since the fallout with Nathan Carter, and every second that passed only deepened the ache of her actions. The room was empty, save for the flicker of an old lamp in the corner. But her thoughts swirled with a constant reminder of what she'd done, the mistake that had nearly destroyed the fragile lives she had touched. As a seasoned police officer, Lisa had always believed she was above reproach, that her instincts were sharp, her decisions justified. But the moment she had laid eyes on Emily Carter, had judged her based on nothing but a misplaced sense of authority, had pulled her out of the night's tranquility, it was a mistake that had gone beyond a mere misstep. She had shattered something precious, something irreparable. Nathan Carter's words echoed in her mind, "If my daughter's hurt again, it's on you." That haunting sentence rang in her ears like a relentless drumbeat, a reminder of the deep consequences of her impulsive actions. She had jeopardized everything, the mission, Emily's dignity, Nathan's trust, all because of her own prejudices. Days passed, but no matter how much she tried to distract herself with paperwork or small tasks, the guilt gnawed at her. Lisa had spent her life trying to uphold the law, but it felt as though she had betrayed it, distorted it, and now she faced the unbearable reality of what that betrayal had cost. There was no escape, not from the shame, not from the endless hours of thinking about Emily's tear-filled eyes as her precious braids were cruelly chopped away. But it was during a quiet moment, when she was alone in her thoughts, that a spark of something new began to stir inside her. Maybe it was the realization that she couldn't keep running from the mistake she'd made. Maybe it was the crushing weight of the truth settling in. What she had done, what she still had the power to do, couldn't be undone. But it could be fixed. If she could redeem herself in Emily's eyes, in Nathan's eyes, in the eyes of those she had hurt, then maybe, just maybe, she could begin to make things right. It wasn't going to be easy. There were no simple fixes to the damage done. But Lisa knew that redemption didn't come from sitting idly by, pretending like the world hadn't shifted beneath her feet. She had to do something, anything, to start making amends. Determined, Lisa walked into the community center on a crisp afternoon, a place she never thought she'd find herself. This wasn't just about making an apology, it was about changing. About showing that her actions, however wrong, could lead to something more than just regret. The center, a place where people of all backgrounds gathered, served as the perfect place to start. And with a steady breath, Lisa knew that this was where she would begin to heal, not just herself, but the relationships she had destroyed. She entered the room, greeted by the sight of Emily, now fully recovered, standing in front of a piano, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys. The music she played, once the source of her pain, had transformed into something else now, something of healing, a reclamation of her dignity. Emily looked up as Lisa entered, and for a brief, quiet moment, their eyes met, neither of them speaking, but everything conveyed in that one look. Emily didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. Her gaze told Lisa all she needed to know. Forgiveness wasn't just about words. It was about the quiet understanding that grew from actions, from showing up, from doing better. As the day went on, Lisa didn't just observe from the sidelines. She worked alongside Emily, assisting in the sessions with the kids, talking to the youth about overcoming adversity, about how mistakes, no matter how big, could be the foundation of something new, something better. She began to share her own story, her own mistake, the one that had nearly cost Emily her dignity. And in doing so, Lisa found a strange sense of relief. By opening up, by taking accountability, she could see that redemption wasn't a solitary journey. It required forgiveness, patience, and understanding from both sides. Over time, Lisa's role in the community center grew, and as the walls of prejudice slowly crumbled around her, she began to rebuild not only the trust with the community but also with herself. Emily, too, had found her place within this transformation, using her music not only as a tool for her own recovery but as a beacon for others who had endured similar struggles. In the midst of it all, the shadow of her mistake still loomed, but Lisa knew that she was moving forward. She wasn't running away anymore. She was changing, for the better, step by step. The days following the incident felt like an endless blur to Lisa. As though the clock itself had slowed down in an effort to force her to confront the reality of what she had done. It was impossible to escape the suffocating weight of guilt, which clung to her like the heavy rain that fell the night she had wronged Emily. The hurt in the young girl's eyes, the quiet dignity with which she endured the shame of her braids being cut away, was forever etched in Lisa's mind. The defiance that flickered in Emily's gaze, despite the cruel act, was a challenge Lisa could not ignore. The mistakes, the wrongful assumptions, the consequences of her actions, they loomed over her like a dark cloud that refused to dissipate. She had underestimated the pain she caused Emily and the family, and her efforts to justify her actions seemed more hollow with each passing moment. The truth was hard to swallow. She had made a decision based not on facts but on a deep-seated prejudice that clouded her judgment. She had violated the very ideals she had sworn to uphold. And now, it felt like everything she had worked for, her career, her sense of right and wrong, had crumbled in an instant. Lisa's life had always been dictated by duty, by what was right on paper. But standing in that sterile office, facing her own reflection, she realized she had never truly questioned her actions before. She had let preconceived notions guide her, thought she was above reproach. But now the consequences were crashing down, and they were more devastating than she could have imagined. But it wasn't just about guilt, it was about redemption. She couldn't change the past, but she knew there was still time to make things right. The storm of her own making wasn't over, it was only beginning. The burning question that gnawed at her was simple. Could she undo the damage she had done? Could she face Emily and her father and earn their forgiveness? The thought of Nathan Carter, the father who had trusted her, only to have her betray him so thoroughly, tightened her chest with anxiety. He was a federal agent, highly skilled, sharp-eyed, someone who would never forget the injustice done to his daughter. Lisa couldn't hide from that reality. She couldn't keep pretending that she hadn't failed both him and Emily. What she had to do was show them, prove to them, that she wasn't the woman who made rash, prejudiced decisions. She had to show them that she could be better, that she would be better. The decision came swiftly, born from a sudden clarity. She had to make things right. Not just apologize and hope they would accept it, but actually change her actions, her mindset, her heart. And so, the next morning, Lisa stepped into the community center, the place where, not long ago, she had stood on the other side of the dividing line, where Emily had shown her the resilience that she now clung to. Lisa entered the room, her presence hesitant but determined. She wasn't there to seek forgiveness immediately, she was there to prove her commitment to change. The first person she saw was Emily, her delicate hands poised above the keys of a piano. The soft melodies Emily played filled the air, and for a moment, the music seemed to wash away some of the suffocating tension that had surrounded Lisa for days. The weight of what she had done still lingered, but the notes coming from Emily's fingers reminded her that there was hope, that healing was possible. Even from the deepest of wounds. The two women exchanged a glance. It wasn't one of anger. Nor was it one of immediate forgiveness. It was a look of mutual understanding, a shared recognition that words alone would not suffice. They were both on a journey, one that would require patience, commitment, and time. Lisa had made her first step, and though she knew the road ahead was long, one where she might be tested again and again, she also knew that she could no longer remain the woman who let prejudice blind her. She had to become the person she wished she had been from the very beginning. Someone who could be trusted. That afternoon, she worked alongside Emily, assisting in the sessions for the kids at the community center. Not just out of obligation, but because she had seen something in Emily's resilience that spoke to her on a deeper level. It wasn't just about righting her wrongs, it was about showing up. Doing better, taking small, but meaningful actions toward redemption. As the day went on, Lisa began to open up about her mistakes, not just to Emily, but to everyone at the center. She shared her story with the youth there, speaking openly about the prejudice she had carried with her, about the unseen barriers that had shaped her decisions. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. It was the first time she realized that real change didn't come from hiding from the past. It came from owning it, facing it, and doing everything in your power to make it better. By the end of the day, Lisa didn't feel like she had fixed everything. But she did feel like she had taken the first step toward healing, toward redemption. And that, for her, was enough to begin with. The days following Emily's heartbreaking encounter with Lisa were a whirlwind for everyone involved. Emily, though still reeling from the humiliation, found a quiet strength within her. She began to understand that the act of cutting off her braids wasn't just an insult to her, but a symbol of something much larger, a reflection of society's prejudice, and a challenge that demanded to be faced head-on. Yet, despite the sharp sting of the moment, Emily refused to allow this injustice to define her. Her braids may have been taken, but her spirit remained unbroken, stronger than ever. Lisa, however, was struggling. The image of Emily's tearful, but defiant, eyes lingered in her mind like a ghost, haunting every thought, every move she made. She had crossed a line that not only shattered the trust of an innocent girl but threatened to unravel everything she had worked for in her career. Lisa had always prided herself on following the rules, on doing what was right according to her badge. But standing there in the sterile walls of the police station, she realized how horribly wrong she had been. What had she done? How had she allowed her own biases to cloud her judgment so completely? The pain of knowing that she had been the cause of such a brutal injustice clawed at her from the inside. It wasn't just Emily's braids she had cut, it was her dignity, her sense of self, and the trust that had been so carefully built over years. Lisa had wronged her, and she couldn't escape the truth. She had failed to see the person in front of her for who she truly was, a young woman who, despite everything, stood tall, resilient, and proud. The weight of her actions crashed down on Lisa with unbearable force. The humiliation of it all gnawed at her like a never-ending ache. But she knew that running from the consequences wouldn't bring redemption. If she was going to undo the damage, she needed to face the fallout head-on. She had to confront her mistakes. And more than that, she had to change. For Emily, for herself, and for everyone who had been impacted by her blind actions. It wasn't long before Lisa decided to take a step toward redemption. The journey would not be easy, and she knew that Emily's forgiveness couldn't be expected immediately. But Lisa had learned something important from the way Emily had held her head high despite the pain, something she had to adopt herself. It was about acknowledging the wrong, yes, but also about rising above it. Just as Emily had, Lisa had to reclaim the compassion and fairness that her badge was meant to represent. With a heavy heart and a determination she hadn't felt in a long time, Lisa set out to make things right. She reached out to Emily's father, Nathan Carter, the man whose trust she had betrayed. In her message, she didn't make excuses. She simply acknowledged the hurt she had caused and asked for a chance to meet, to apologize in person, to offer something more than words. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot she had. Nathan's response was as cold as the night air. But Lisa wasn't deterred. She knew that his anger wasn't personal, it was protective. He had every right to feel that way, and Lisa respected that. But she had made up her mind. She would not rest until she had done everything in her power to right her wrongs. The meeting was set. When Lisa arrived at the Carter household, she was struck by the quiet beauty of the place, and the heavy burden of what she had done seemed even more oppressive in that moment. Emily wasn't there, but Nathan stood waiting at the door, his expression hard but composed. "I'm here to apologize," Lisa said, her voice steady but filled with genuine remorse. She took a deep breath, letting the weight of the words settle. "I can't undo what I did, but I can tell you that I've learned from it. I was wrong, about Emily. About everything. I judged her based on nothing but my own bias. And it was wrong." Nathan's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. He simply stood there, watching her with an unreadable expression. "I don't expect forgiveness right away. And I don't deserve it," Lisa continued, "but I do want to change. I want to prove that I can be better. For Emily. For everyone I've let down." The silence between them was thick, palpable. Lisa felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice, with nothing but her own honesty to keep her from falling. Nathan studied her for a moment longer, his gaze sharp, before he finally spoke. "I can't speak for Emily," he said, his voice low and controlled. "But I can tell you that actions speak louder than words. Lisa, you've got a long road ahead of you. But if you're serious about change, we'll see it in what you do from here." Lisa nodded, her chest tight, but her resolve was firmer than it had ever been. She had taken the first step. Now, it was time to follow through. As she left the Carter house, Lisa didn't feel like she had redeemed herself. But she did feel like she had made a promise she intended to keep. The weight of Lisa's decisions hung over her like an oppressive cloud. The guilt gnawing at her every moment. Despite her best efforts to suppress it, Emily's face, the defiance, the pain, continued to haunt her. The injustice of it all, the humiliation she had forced upon an innocent girl, was inescapable. Lisa knew deep down that there was no real justification for her actions. No easy way to undo the harm she had caused. But what was even harder to swallow was the realization that she had become everything she had once despised, the very kind of officer she had sworn to never become. The arrogance, the prejudices, the harsh judgments, it was all there. And it was now clear to her how badly it had affected those around her. And as if the universe itself were forcing her to face the consequences head-on. The call came, the one that shattered her fragile sense of composure. Emily's father, Nathan Carter, reached out, demanding she meet him. Lisa had no idea what to expect. But the dread in her chest was unbearable. She knew she had to confront this moment. To apologize, to fully acknowledge the depths of her mistakes. Arriving at the Carter household, Lisa was struck by the quiet, unassuming nature of it all. Nathan stood in the doorway, his face a mask of barely contained anger. He was a man of few words, but the weight of his silence spoke volumes. Every part of Lisa's body trembled with the awareness of what she had done. Yet, there was no turning back now. She needed to face him, to face the truth she had been avoiding for so long. "I owe you an apology," Lisa began, her voice surprisingly steady despite the lump in her throat. "And it's not just about Emily. It's about me, my failure, and the harm I caused." Nathan didn't speak, but his eyes were unwavering. The tension in the air was suffocating. Yet Lisa didn't look away. She had spent too long hiding behind excuses. It was time to own up to her actions. To accept the brutal reality of her ignorance. "I acted out of prejudice. I judged Emily based on my own assumptions. And I failed her," Lisa continued, the weight of the words pressing down on her like 1,000 bricks. "I should have known better. I should have seen her for who she truly is, not some threat to society. Not someone who deserves to be treated with cruelty. She didn't deserve that, and I'm deeply sorry." Nathan's gaze softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "It's not enough to just say you're sorry, Lisa. Not after what you did." His words stung like an open wound. But Lisa knew they were justified. She wasn't entitled to forgiveness, not yet. But there was something else in Nathan's eyes, a flicker of something deeper. Something that almost felt like a hint of understanding. As he met Lisa's gaze, his expression remained stern, yet there was a shift. A quiet acceptance that she was, at least, trying to make things right. "You've got a long way to go, Lisa," Nathan said, his voice even. "But the fact that you're here, owning up to your mistakes, well, that counts for something." The air was thick with emotion. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Lisa didn't feel like she was fighting alone. Nathan's words, though tough, gave her a glimpse of hope. She wasn't beyond redemption, and that knowledge was a lifeline she could hold on to. As Lisa turned to leave, her heart was still heavy. But there was a glimmer of resolve. She wasn't sure where this journey would lead her. But she knew one thing for certain, she would make things right. She had to. For Emily, for Nathan, and for herself. This story teaches us the power of redemption, the importance of confronting our biases, and the strength that lies in forgiveness. It's easy to judge others based on assumptions, but it's only through understanding, humility, and genuine change that we can right our wrongs. Emily's courage in facing injustice and Lisa's journey towards redemption highlight that no one is beyond change. And that we can all make a difference by acknowledging our mistakes and working toward becoming better versions of ourselves. If this story resonated with you, please support our channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more powerful stories that inspired change and understanding. Thank you for your support.